For 1,000 years, the English language had a glaring blind spot. If you wanted to describe the color of autumn leaves, a sunset, or the embers in a campfire, you had to use a clunky workaround, the compound word yellow-red. While other fruits like the lemon or the plum eventually became names for specific shades, the orange did something far more fundamental. It ended a millennium-long stretch where English had no standalone word for this entire section of the visible spectrum. The arrival of the fruit provided a solution to a linguistic gap that had persisted since the dawn of the language, eventually replacing yellow-red with a single borrowed name. If you trace its history back 8 million years to the foothills where the Himalayas meet the jungles of Southeast Asia, you wouldn't recognize the first citrus fruits. The wild ancestors of the modern orange were small, packed with seeds, and violently sour. This diagram illustrates how we got the sweet orange we eat today, which did not exist in nature. Thousands of years ago, Chinese farmers carefully crossbred two completely different, naturally occurring fruits, the mandarin and the pomelo. As traders moved this new crop westward along ancient trade routes, its name traveled with it. The original Sanskrit word for the tree was naranga. Passing through new territories, Persian traders adapted it as narang, and Arabic merchants carried it further as naranj. When the fruit eventually reached France, speakers repeatedly confused the leading N in the word with the N sound in the French article un. Over time, un-naranj blurred into un-orange, completely dropping the front consonant. By the time it arrived in England, the word had passed through half a dozen dialects. The name we use today is a literal fossil of those ancient overland journeys. Up until the late 1400s, Europe only knew a bitter variety of this citrus, treating it mostly as a garden decoration or a sharp medicine. But when Portuguese sailors returned from their voyages across the Indian Ocean with a sweeter, juicier variant, they created a sensation. For the first time, people actually wanted to eat it. As this sweet fruit flooded English markets in the 1500s, people began applying its name directly to the color. The word started appearing in Scottish account books to describe velvet and showing up in standard textile inventories. This vintage illustration documents Newton's 1660s prism experiments. He identified 7 distinct bands: red, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, and finally, orange. Looking at this double rainbow arc, we see the formalized breakdown of color. Newton gave this newly named hue a permanent place in physics. Back on land, the fruit was becoming a powerful tool for the aristocracy. These trees were incredibly sensitive to cold, making them nearly impossible to grow outdoors in Northern Europe. Naturally, this meant the wealthiest elites spent vast fortunes building elaborate heated glass structures just to force them to survive the winter. King Louis XIV of France built a massive greenhouse at Versailles specifically for this purpose. The walls were 5 meters thick to trap the heat, and he filled the vaulted gallery with thousands of trees, many of which he had simply seized from disgraced political rivals. Visiting diplomats would arrive in the dead of winter and walk into a blooming Mediterranean orchard. The king used citrus to project raw power, proving he could command the seasons themselves. While French royalty hoarded trees in silver tubs, sailors on long ocean voyages were dying by the tens of thousands. A devastating disease called scurvy caused gums to swell, teeth to fall out, and old wounds to spontaneously reopen. Over 3 centuries, the British Navy lost an estimated 1 million men to the condition. This matrix maps out the first controlled clinical trial in medical history, run by Scottish surgeon James Lind in 1747. He divided 12 sailors with scurvy into 6 pairs, giving each a different treatment, from seawater to vinegar. The 6th pair received oranges and lemons. After 6 days, those 2 sailors made a dramatic recovery, while the other 10 showed 0 improvement. This wasn't just a medical breakthrough, it was a strategic one. By eliminating the disease that killed more sailors than combat, the British Navy could keep its fleet at sea for months at a time, maintaining blockades and long-range voyages that its rivals simply couldn't sustain. Decades later, on the grounds of a monastery in Brazil around 1820, an ordinary orange tree did something strange. A single branch experienced a random genetic mutation, producing a fruit with a small secondary orange growing tucked inside its base. It looked exactly like a human belly button. This peculiar mutation yielded a crop that was incredibly juicy, exceptionally sweet, and entirely devoid of seeds. But a fruit with no seeds has a massive biological flaw. It cannot reproduce. Left alone, the mutation would have died with that specific branch. To keep it alive, someone sliced a cutting from the mutant tree and grafted it onto the living trunk of a completely separate citrus tree. That process was repeated and repeated again. Because it only spreads through physical grafting, every single navel orange you have ever eaten is an exact genetic clone of that mutated branch from 200 years ago. Humans identified a biological dead end, manually preserved it, and propagated it into one of the most widely consumed agricultural products on Earth. Looking at this vintage advertising art, you can see how these cloned trees overhauled the economy of 1870s California. Paired with the newly built transcontinental railroads, aggressive marketing campaigns like this turned a few starter trees into a sprawling, wealthy agricultural empire. Yet for most of human history, people chewed their citrus. Squeezing an orange at home was easy enough, but fresh juice spoiled within hours. It was impossible to store or ship in any meaningful volume, keeping it strictly a seasonal, local treat. That barrier stood until 1954, when an Italian immigrant in Florida named Anthony Rossi developed a process called flash pasteurization. He found a way to heat the liquid just long enough to kill the bacteria without boiling away the fresh flavor. With the spoilage problem solved, Rossi began shipping massive vats of chilled, ready-to-drink juice to the Northeast via dedicated refrigerated freight trains. This technical breakthrough, combined with marketing campaigns that rebranded juice as a cornerstone of the complete breakfast, successfully transformed a perishable seasonal crop into a daily American morning staple. Today, this crop covers over 3.6 million hectares of farmland worldwide. As we pan across this historical photograph showing expansive groves growing alongside towering oil derricks, the industrial scale of the modern citrus economy is striking. Over roughly 4 centuries, a bitter Himalayan berry was engineered into a sweet crop, carrying its ancient name across continents. Evolved from an aristocratic status symbol to a life-saving naval medicine, and eventually a globally cloned commodity. A bag of citrus sitting on a supermarket shelf is a biological map of human civilization, drawing a direct line between ancient Sanskrit scholars, ambitious French kings, desperate British surgeons, and modern industrial food processing. Next time you peel one, notice that sharp mist of oil jumping off the rind. It took millions of years of evolution and thousands of years of trade to put it right in your hands. If you made it this far, hit subscribe and let us know in the comments which chapter of the orange's history surprised you most.